When you experience the best day of your life, it's important to remember that things might only go downhill from there. For me, that day was when I married Zoe Rodriguez, now Mrs. Stephen Walker. Zoe was 24, a fresh-faced teacher at a grade school in Macon, Georgia, where my older sister also worked. Zoe's charm caught my sister's eye, and she was determined to set us up. At the time, I was 27 and had just graduated from the University of Georgia Law School. I had landed my first job as an associate lawyer at Anderson, Lopez, and Lewis, earning $40,000 a year. It took a year of dating, sometimes on and sometimes off, before Zoe and I got married. She later confessed that she fell in love with me the moment we met, at a party my sister hosted for new teachers and other local notables. I was among the others, along with representatives from various social organizations, which was my sister's way of integrating the new teachers into Macon's social scene. Having grown up in Macon, I already knew most of the people there, but my sister, Ella, believed I needed introductions to the right kind of girl. Zoe, who had grown up in South Georgia and attended the University of Georgia on a partial scholarship, was thrilled to start her teaching career in Macon. I was equally thrilled to show her around. As our relationship progressed, we went from a little kissing to a lot of kissing too. Well, you get the picture. "Stephen, honey, I'm sorry, but I'm just not comfortable with you touching me. I mean, I like it, but it's going to lead to more and then even more. I have to tell you, when I get married, I want to walk down the aisle clean and untainted, the perfect bride for my husband." "Wow," I responded. "You must have practiced that a few times, maybe even used it on a few guys." I wasn't trying to insult her, but she definitely took it that way. We were in my apartment, and she jumped up, muttered something about my bad intentions, and left. I sat there, waiting for her to come back. I had picked her up from her apartment, which she shared with two other girls, and we had gone out to dinner. I wondered how she planned to get home. Later, I found out from my sister Ella that Zoe had called her. Ella picked her up, and they went out for coffee and a heart-to-heart. Ella called me the next morning and told me, in that sisterly way, to cool my jets. She said Zoe cared for me a lot, but she was inexperienced and needed me to take things slow. "Hello," Zoe answered when I called later that day. "Zoe, it's Stephen. I want to apologize for my comment last night. You were being honest with me, and I spoke without considering the importance of what you were saying. You mean a lot to me, and I hope you'll forgive me. I didn't really care much about purity and things like that, but I liked Zoe a lot, and I thought we might have a future together." And we did. 6 months later, she walked down the aisle in a little church in South Georgia, and we married in a very traditional ceremony. She was indeed unsullied, but we changed that on the first night of our honeymoon at a resort on Amelia Island. Over the years, we always went to bed together, even on nights when we were swamped with work. Whether I was buried in tasks at the law firm or Zoe was overwhelmed with grading papers and preparing lesson plans, going to bed together was our unwavering ritual. Sometimes, one of us would get up in the middle of the night or early morning to tackle paperwork, but the act of turning in together was sacred. This nightly routine meant we snuggled up, shared happiness, and strengthened our bond. Until the arrival of the Martian horror ray disrupted everything. We had been married for nearly 6 years when I experienced what I believe to be the best day of my life. Macon doesn't have many flights to its small airport, given that the massive Atlanta airport is only about 90 minutes away. I had been in Nashville, working with the retired owner of a hardware store in Macon. He wanted to ensure that the ownership transferred exclusively to one of his children. We navigated the issues, he signed the necessary papers, and we were both pleased. My day got even better when I discovered a direct flight from Nashville to Macon. On that flight, I met the man who made it the best day of my life possible. John Martinez was a shopping center developer from Nashville. His specialty was smaller cities that he believed were underserved in retail opportunities but had significant growth potential. He had identified Macon as one such city and was flying down to explore potential development sites. At the time, I was a senior associate at my law firm, still a few years away from making partner. I happened to be seated next to John and spent the entire flight pitching my law firm as the best in Macon and myself as the ideal lawyer for shopping center development deals. In truth, I had never handled such a deal before, but I embraced the philosophy of fake it till you make it. John was impressed, either by my professed skills or my confidence. Regardless, he hired me. Well, he hired my law firm. Over the next 2 years, we identified the perfect site, formed a new LLC for John to acquire it, pitched to potential investors, secured equity and loan deals for financing, and negotiated pre-lease deals for retail anchors. The project took on a life of its own, and with John often in Nashville or elsewhere, it increasingly depended on me. I loved every minute of it. I must admit, all that work impacted my personal life. I had less time for my relationship with Zoe, especially for those seemingly insignificant moments that are actually filled with meaning. Sitting on the couch holding each other while watching a silly movie, going for ice cream at Dairy Queen, the small things that build strength and bonding in a relationship. Despite the demands, I held on to our commitment to always go to bed together, which I think was incredibly important for us. But I often found myself up at 4 or 5 in the morning, working on spreadsheets, LLC agreements, or whatever the issue of the day was. Finally, we closed on the major loan on a Thursday morning, and my firm collected the biggest fee in its history. Brandon Lopez, the managing partner, called me into his office where he and the other 2 partners had opened a bottle of champagne. He handed me a glass. "Stephen, when you started working with John Martinez 2 years ago, we had some concerns," he said, pointing to his partners. "We thought you might not be the right fit. Too young, not enough experience, not enough gravitas, if you know what I mean." I stayed silent. He wouldn't be handing me champagne if this were bad news. "But you have done an exceptional job, maybe better than any of us," he continued, pointing to his partners again, "could have done. You have absolutely thrown yourself into this project, impressed everyone you've worked with, and frankly, made us a lot of money. We had a quick partners meeting just a few minutes ago, before popping the champagne, and voted to do 2 things. 1. An immediate $100,000 bonus in recognition of your outstanding work, and 2. An offer to join us as a partner, effective immediately, in recognition of the lawyer you have become and the lawyer we want to work with for decades to come." I have to admit, I never saw any of this coming. I knew they would give me a big bonus, but $100,000 and, more importantly, a partnership. I stood there, completely stunned. "Stephen, take a drink of your champagne and say something," Mr. Lewis said with a smile. They all knew I was in shock. "Mr. Lewis, No, he interrupted. "As partners, we go by first names here. I'm William. Lopez there is Brandon, and Anderson, well, he's so old, maybe you should call him Mr." They all laughed, and Anderson jumped in. "Stephen, you call me Nicholas around here. But you can call me anything you want when you're paying me on the golf course after I beat you." More laughter followed, and I finally took a sip of the champagne, still trying to process everything. "Take the rest of the day off, Stephen. Go tell your beautiful wife the good news. I know you have some loose ends to tie up with the shopping center deal, but a condition of the partnership is that you take a week off to recover from all the work you've been doing. Take your wife on a cruise or something." "Got it," Brandon, formerly Mr. Lopez, said. "Yes, sir," I responded, starting to regain my composure. "And gentlemen, thank you for the trust you've shown in me over the years, for the generous bonus, and most of all, for the honor of joining the partnership. This is the proudest achievement of my life." We all shook hands, finished the champagne, chatted a bit more, and I headed home to share the news with Zoe. It was the best day of my life. Zoe was already home when I arrived. The next day, Friday, was the last day of school, and both Thursday and Friday were half days to give the teachers time to finish grading and prepare report cards. Zoe was busy working at the kitchen table when I walked in. "Honey, I have some great news to share," I said, taking off my coat and tie. "Stephen, I'm almost finished here, and I have some news to share with you too. Just let me wrap up these last report cards, and then we can talk." I stepped aside and started browsing possible cruises departing next week on our home computer. The Caribbean seemed like a good option, though there were so many choices to sift through. It's a tough job, but someone has to do it. A little later, Zoe wandered into my home office with a glass of wine and a look of concern on her face. Honey, you look worried. Is it about your news? Well, she began, and I interrupted. You're not sick, are you? We can. I started, slipping into my usual problem-solving lawyer mode. No, I'm not sick. I just wanted to tell you about my schedule for next week. School's out, as you know, and I've signed up for a course next Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 10 to 2 each day. Oh, well, I fumbled for words. This was the first I'd heard of a course, and I was already dreaming of nights in the Caribbean. Would it be possible to reschedule? I've already started to. No, she interrupted. Patrick, the teacher, has already squeezed me in, and I've already paid a deposit. Wow. Okay. What kind of course is it? Is it here in town? Yes, it's here. The classes are at Patrick's house, over on Laramie Drive. Okay, what is he teaching that the course is at his house? Stephen, listen, okay, this is a marriage education course. Patrick is teaching a technique that will improve my abilities in bed. It's going to be very beneficial for me and for us, me and you and me. Wait, what? What kind of technique? In his house. My mind was reeling. She couldn't mean what I thought she did, could she? Zoe, how many students will there be? All women, or men too? Well, it's just going to be him and me on the first day. That he might bring in an assistant for the second day, and maybe someone else for the last day. He calls it the grand finale. Stephen, this could be very good for us, and... Yeah, you mentioned that already. My question is, does this course mean you're going to sleep with this guy? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. And with his assistants, too. Well, yes, of course. Patrick says practice is the only way to get better, and different experiences with different people make for better practice. One of my high school friends took this course a few weeks ago during spring break. She said she had a great time and learned a lot. She said Patrick rated her improvement from an 80th percentile base level to the 92nd percentile in overall bed activity. And my base is already in the 90th percentile, so I have a chance to score very high. Zoe, have you lost your mind? I can't believe what you're saying. Your base. How does this Patrick know about your level of skill? It's not like you're... I couldn't finish. I couldn't bring myself to ask if she was having an affair with this guy. If she had, our marriage was over. We'd vowed to each other in her church almost 6 years ago, and we'd kept that promise every night since. Patrick said it was important for him to know my base level so he could choose the best classes for me. I just stared at her. This wasn't my wife speaking. I had to ask. Zoe, have you already done something with Patrick? No, that would be cheating. Then how does Patrick know what your baseline level is? Well, I did it with my mouth, only briefly, but he said it felt really good. Then he went down on me for a few minutes to gauge my reaction to the stimulation. Really, Stephen, it was just preparation for the class. Martian horror ray, I thought. My wife was hit by a Martian horror ray, and now she's being controlled by some alien being who has no idea of our obligations to each other. Okay, I know MUR is just a metaphor for the average wife going crazy over guys younger than herself or something. Wait. Zoe, you said Patrick would have assistants for the grand finale. What does that mean? Multiple assistants at the same time. Oh, I don't know. It depends on how I do the first 2 days of class. Patrick said my high baseline indicates I can do well. And Stephen, my high baseline must be due to what you and I have been doing since we got married. We should be proud that my score is so high without any special training. Patrick says, Zoe, please listen to me. First of all, I don't want to hear that name again. He's destroying our marriage, or rather you are. When we first started talking, I asked if you were sick. You said you weren't, but I think you must be sick, I mean. Zoe, my wife, the woman I've loved for over 6 years, can't plan to sleep with multiple men next week. Zoe, you're asking for a divorce. You know that, don't you? Stephen, please listen to me. Patrick, okay, I won't say his name again. The instructor said you might respond this way and suggested I not even tell you about the course. But we've always been honest and open with each other, so I thought it best to share with you. Think of this course like one of your legal education courses, except this is marriage education. I believe I'll learn a lot more practical stuff than you do in your law courses. I looked at her like she was crazy. And you are, I thought again. How can my wife, my Zoe, how can she? Oh God, another thought. Zoe, you said you already paid a deposit. Yes, $500, and the balance of $400 is due on the first day of class. Patrick, he said he was giving me a $100 discount because my high base level would make it a pleasure to teach me. I just wanted to grab a gun and shoot her, put her out of my misery. No one would blame me after this conversation. Zoe, please listen. I am as serious as a heart attack. If you go through with this, I will file for divorce next week. With what you have already done, we may end up divorced anyway, but I need to think about that. We definitely need counseling if we have any chance to survive as a married couple. Do you hear what I'm saying? Stephen, I hear you, but I don't think you're hearing me. This isn't me cheating with some guy I picked up in a bar. I would never do that. This is education. I believe in education. I believe in the importance of education and how it can make our lives better. I think you believe that too. I admit marriage education like this isn't mainstream, but this will be good for me and for us. You need to trust me on this. All right, Zoe, I give up. Remember what I said about divorce. I'm going for a run. Stephen, what about your news? You said you had something to share. Zoe, my news is nothing compared to yours. I headed to our bedroom to change into my running clothes and moved some of my stuff to the guest room. My run started terribly. I was too distracted by our conversation to settle into a rhythm, but after a few miles, the stress began to drain away. Running always helped clear my mind, and this run was no exception. I realized I had been neglecting my running due to work, and I felt it after a few miles. I headed back to what used to be home, uncertain of what it was now. By the time I returned, Zoe was in bed, which was a relief since I had no desire to talk. I took a quick shower and went to sleep in the guest room. The next morning, I left the house early before Zoe woke up. When I arrived at the office, Brandon Lopes was already there. Mr. Lopes, Brandon, do you have a minute? Sure, Stephen, what's up? I thought you might sleep in this morning. Sir, I have a real problem at home, and I need some help, I said, and then I gave him a brief summary of Zoe's news. My God, that's quite a story. I like that term, MDR. I've never heard it before, but now I'll have to add it to my vocabulary. Okay, first things first, you need a good family lawyer. I don't want to call her a divorce lawyer quite yet, but she certainly is one. Elizabeth Hernandez. Don't call her Beth or Liz, it's Elizabeth. She's very formal and the best divorce lawyer in Macon. Whoops, I'm already saying divorce. Stephen, I hope it doesn't come to that, but I understand if it does. The times I've met Zoe, she seems solid, with a good head on her shoulders. From South Georgia, right? Yes, sir, that's right. This is just so bizarre. I asked her if she was sick, but she said no. Well, if she has some sort of mental illness, she might not recognize it. I think she's crazy, but it's an insult to people with real mental illness to blame this on a mental problem. I'm afraid she's just sleeping with someone else, and this is her way of justifying it. Maybe. Either way, the next step is to cancel your bonus. Now, don't look even worse than you already feel. It's just a temporary measure. If you get divorced, it's better not to have to share it with your ex-wife. Once this blows over, you'll still get that bonus. Similarly, the partnership is off the table for now. But between us, both the bonus and the partnership are still yours. Since we haven't formalized anything yet, I can testify, if needed, that you're not entitled to either the bonus or the partnership. Got it. Wow. Yeah, I get it. It's just hard to process. Yesterday, I was on top of the world, and Zoe and I were inseparable. Now she's acting crazy, and I'm planning to keep things separate from her. Stephen, stop. Listen to me. You need to get out of the office. I know you're a runner and like to work out. Go do both, then come back and check in with me. I'll call Elizabeth Hernandez and set up an appointment for you later today. Makes sense? Yes, sir. Thanks, it does. and thanks for all the help. Hey, that's what partners are for. I headed out but stopped by the break room for some coffee first. I was sitting there, just staring at the wall, not even drinking my coffee, when our receptionist walked in. Scarlett Mathy, something, I could never remember her last name, got her coffee and started to leave, but then she stopped. Mr. Walker, are you okay? You look sick, or something. Thanks, Scarlett, I'm just sitting here. Well, maybe you should go home. I know you closed your big deal yesterday. Everyone in the firm is talking about it. You should go celebrate or something, not just sit here. Yeah, thanks, Scarlett. I'll get out of your way. As I got up to leave, she added, I'm sorry, you're not in my way. I didn't mean. I went for another run, short and unsatisfying. When I got back to our office building, which has a workout room and showers, I worked out until it was almost time for my appointment with Elizabeth. I showered and arrived at her office on time for my 1 p.m. meeting. Stephen, I hope it's all right to call you that, she began, catching my eye. Brandon Lopes mentioned you're a friend of his, which makes you a friend of mine too. He had a lot of good things to say about you, but he also mentioned your wife had been impacted by the MBR. She mimicked air quotes around the term, making us both chuckle. It felt good to laugh for a moment. Yeah, that's exactly what I told him. I retold the story once again. Elizabeth listened intently, jotting down notes, offering sympathetic nods, and never interrupting my bleak narrative. I wrapped up with, honestly, it's like she's lost her mind. Her eagerness to have fun with multiple men, and possibly even a woman next week, goes against everything we believed in since we met almost 7 years ago. I'm at my wit's end trying to make sense of this. That's what I'm here for, to help you understand and create a plan to deal with her actions. So, she plans to start this marriage education course on Monday, right? More air quotes, but no laughing this time. Right. So you have the weekend to hope she changes her mind, she continued. Yes, but... Hold on, let me finish. I think you should give her that chance. Meanwhile, I can prepare a divorce petition to file on Monday afternoon if she goes through with this madness. If she reconsiders, I recommend serious marriage counseling for both of you. If you still want to try to make it work, that is. I can draft a standard divorce petition this afternoon, with financial matters to be determined later. We can also hire a private investigator to follow her on Monday if necessary, or you can do it yourself. But if you do, you need to assure me you won't do anything that could risk your law license or land you in jail. If she proceeds with this, I can have her served at the location where the adultery, because that's what it is happening. We might even be able to interrupt the course. More air quotes. She seemed fond of them, though I was starting to find it tiresome. She continued, unfazed. And another thing. She's already paid this Patrick a $500 deposit. One could argue that Payne makes her a prostitute, which is a crime in Georgia. You mean she could end up in jail? Not likely, especially since it's often just fined. But would you like me to prepare the petition in case it's needed on Monday? Yes, please. Just email it to my office account, and I'll review it over the weekend. Consider it done. Good luck this weekend. Hopefully, she comes to her senses. With no better idea of where to go, I headed back to my office. I'm not one for drinking, and the idea of hitting a bar on a Friday afternoon held no appeal. Going home felt even less inviting. I walked into a nearly deserted office. Initially, it seemed even the receptionist was gone, but she quickly appeared when she heard the guest chime. Mr. Walker, are you feeling better? Oh wow, maybe it's not my place to say, but you look worse than you did this morning. Have you seen a doctor? Scarlett, where is everyone? It looks like the office has shut down. Well, Mr. Lopes said everyone has been working really hard lately, and since you, Mr. Walker, just closed a massive deal for one of our top clients, he decided to give everyone the rest of the day off. I'm just tidying up before heading home. That's nice of him. Scarlett, could you do one more thing before you leave? I could really use a cup of fresh coffee. That machine always confuses me. Of course, I'll be right back with a fresh cup. Black, right? Yes, thank you. She returned to my office in a few minutes with a steaming cup. After the day I'd had, I needed something to lift my spirits. I thanked her again, and as she started to leave, she turned back to me. Mr. Walker, Stephen Scarlett. Please call me Stephen. Okay, Stephen. It feels strange to call you that, but it suits you better than Mr. Walker. So, Stephen, I know I'm just the receptionist, but I want you to know I'm a kind person, and you look like you could use some kindness right now. If you need someone to talk to about whatever's bothering you, I can listen without judgment. I looked at her for a long moment. There was a serene presence about this woman whose last name I didn't even know. Scarlett, I'm embarrassed to admit this, but I don't even know your last name. It's McKenna, Scarlett McKenna. I know the names don't really fit together. My mom is German and my dad was Irish. I'm named after my mom's mother, who passed away during World War II. Okay, Scarlett McKenna, why are you being so nice to me? Except for getting coffee and reserving conference rooms, we've hardly spoken. Because you look so sad. I know you've been working incredibly hard these past months. You're always here, and you're always kind to everyone, even when you must be exhausted. I just want to be nice to you when you seem to need it the most. Well, you're right. I am sad, confused, angry, and do you really want to hear a very sad, and I think, very strange story? I hear you saying you really need to tell it, so yes, I want to hear it. So, for the third time that day, I recounted my story, and this time, I began to feel a sense of catharsis. When I finished, Scarlett, my new friend, gave me a long look. MUR. She burst into laughter, and soon I joined in, sounding almost hysterical. Stephen, that's a horrible and bizarre story. There must be something seriously wrong with your wife. Yeah, I think so too, but apart from preparing for a divorce, I don't know what else to do. Right now, I don't want to go home and listen to more of her nonsense, so I'm just stuck. After a moment of contemplation, Scarlett spoke again. Stephen, I have an idea, a just-for-now idea. Come home with me and have dinner with my daughter, my mom, and me. I'll whip up pasta. Scarlett, it's Friday evening, and I bet a lot of money that you weren't planning to whip up anything. How old is your daughter? 11. You were planning to get fast food, McDonald's maybe, or Chick-fil-A, actually. Hannah, my daughter, loves their chocolate milkshakes. She and I go and leave my mom to watch TV. She records the soaps during the week and binges on them when Hannah and I are out. Okay, my new friend Scarlett, let's get our cars, and I'll follow you home. Then it's off to Chick-fil-A, and that's what we did. Being with Scarlett and Hannah cheered me up. Hannah had just finished primary school and was heading to middle school in the fall. She was proud of her straight A's, and so was Scarlett. It was comforting to sit and listen to their mother-daughter chat, a mix of relaxing and bittersweet. Scarlett noticed and did her best to include me in the conversation. Stephen, how long have you been a runner? Everyone at the firm knows you run in the mornings before coming to the office. How many miles do you cover each week? Did you run at UJ? Yes, I ran at UGA on the cross-country team in the fall and track in the spring. Truthfully, I wasn't really good enough for an NC double at Division I school like Georgia, but the coaches liked my work ethic and let me stay on the team. I never placed in any races, but being on those teams was an invaluable experience. I'm what they call a scholar athlete. It doesn't mean much except I get great seats for Georgia football games. Wait, Mr. Stephen. You went to Georgia, ran on their teams, and go to their football games. I love Georgia. Mom says that if I keep my grades up, I can go there with a Hopi scholarship that will pay for everything. Hannah, you're absolutely right. The Hope Scholarship is fantastic. Just make sure to keep your grades up to qualify. I know. Mom reminds me about it practically every day. Hearing this from an 11-year-old impressed me with her maturity, and it was smart of her mom to encourage academic excellence early on. We continued chatting about school, the Macon Bacon, our local minor league baseball team, and, with a sidelong glance at Scarlett, an upcoming concert in Atlanta. Apparently, a promise had been made. Straight A's would earn a concert trip. Mom now looked a bit uncomfortable. Well, ladies, I interjected to prevent further discomfort. I need to head out. Thanks for inviting me to dinner. The chicken was great, but your company was even better. You two really brightened my day. so thank you. Hannah, it was great meeting you. Scarlett McKenna, I'll see you on Monday. By the way, I love your name. Have a nice weekend, both of you. As I walked away, I overheard Hannah asking, your name. What was he talking about, Mom? It made me smile. That smile vanished when I got home. Zoe was waiting, ready to scold me for being late. I intercepted her irritation. Zoe, I began as I stepped in, don't even start. I needed some space. Unless you're here to tell me you've canceled your plans to cheat next week, I'm not interested in talking. Well, Stephen, I do have some good news, which you'd know already if you'd come home on time. She got her jab in, but I was curious about the supposed good news. I motioned for her to continue. I spoke with Patrick, the teacher, today and told him your concerns about next week's course. You mean with another man next week? I retorted. Geez, Stephen, stop. We see things differently, but I love you and want what's best for us. So we compromised. He keeps the deposit, and I attend the first day's lessons. By day's end, if either of us feels the lessons aren't beneficial, I won't pay him any more or attend further sessions. Isn't that a compromise you can live with? My initial thought was MBR, and I almost laughed, but then I had another idea. Zoe, I think this is just an excuse for you to sleep with another man and pay for it too. I know you disagree, so let's call your mom and see what she thinks about your idea. Ha! Stephen, you've met Mama and Daddy. They think advanced algebra is practically sinful. Any kind of marriage education. That's forbidden about 40 times in the Bible, or at least the way they interpret it. So no, that's a non-starter. How about this? Let's not discuss it any further until Monday night. I promise to fill you in on what I learned then. If you believe it's worthless, and I haven't gained anything, and you promise to be completely objective, I'll agree to not go back. But you have to promise to be objective. Deal? I shook my head and walked away. Another night in the guest room and up early on Saturday morning for a long run. This time it was enjoyable, not too hot yet. I started slow until I warmed up, then managed several sub-7-minute miles in a row. Not my college times, but pretty good for a 40-year-old lawyer. I headed back home for a shower. Zoe wasn't up yet, so I decided to head out. Where to? Not the office. I'd had enough of that place for the week. Without planning or much thought, well, admit it, of course I intended it, I found myself parked in front of Scarlett's townhouse. I rang the doorbell. I'll get it, I heard Scarlett call from inside. She opened the door, standing there with grease on her face, her hair pulled under a white head cover, and odd-looking gloves on her hands. Despite her appearance, she looked stunning, though her tone didn't match. Stephen, what the? I was cleaning the oven. You can't just. Mom, come here, quick. She disappeared inside. An older woman appeared as I stood there, realizing I'd made a colossal error. I'm Mrs. McKenna, she said, and you must be Stephen something or other. Come in and sit down. You did something at Georgia, and my granddaughter thinks you might have hung the moon. My daughter might have thought the same thing last night, but showing up here unannounced? Woo, big mistake, mister. You're right, Mrs. McKenna. I feel really stupid. Could you please tell her I'm sorry? I'll call her later, or maybe just see her on Monday. No, sir. You've made a mess of things, and now it's your job to clean them up. She went to freshen up, so you will wait and be courteous enough to apologize and compliment her properly. Clear. Yes, Mom, you're right. I'll wait for her. Is Hannah around? Maybe I can chat with her while I wait. No, Hannah is out playing soccer. Scarlett has to pick her up in about an hour. All right, I'll just sit here quietly then. Good, she grumbled as she walked away. I felt completely idiotic and wanted to disappear, never to face Scarlett again. But then Scarlett returned to the living room. She had removed her headpiece and gloves, washed her face, applied some makeup and lipstick, and changed clothes. She looked stunning. I realized I had never truly seen her before, despite her working at BCQ for at least a year. My oversight, entirely. Stephen, Scarlett, please, let me start. I'm truly sorry for barging in without even calling ahead. I feel incredibly foolish, especially for putting you in a difficult situation. I met your mom, and she gave me a well-deserved lecture. Yes, she's quite adept at that. I'm not sure why you've come, but it was rather embarrassing for me to open the door to you. I began to interject, but she continued, Wait, Stephen, let me finish. Hannah is playing soccer this morning. How about we drive over to the field? We can watch her play, and you can explain why you're here. Sure, that sounds good. Again, I'm really sorry for embarrassing you. It was incredibly rude. Yes, it was, but let's move past that and go watch the game. So we did. We drove over to watch Hannah play. She was decent, if not spectacular. Watching the game gave Scarlett and me a chance to talk, mostly me rambling while she listened sympathetically. After enduring my complaints about Zoe for a bit, as the game neared its end, Scarlett interrupted me. Stephen, you need to make a decision. Do you know what I mean? I looked puzzled, so she tried another metaphor. You need to fish or cut bait. Let me put it this way. You need to either accept what Zoe is planning to do, which I know you don't want, or, with all the firmness you can muster, tell her that if she goes through with it, you will definitely file for divorce next week, and make sure she believes you. Just like that, our conversation ended. Hannah came running over, beaming with the joy of a game-winning 11-year-old. I offered to take them out for lunch, but Scarlett quickly declined, citing work they'd both needed to do at home. I dropped them off at their townhouse and, as usual, headed to the office. Facing Zoe was out of the question. I'd already run that day, had no desire to call friends and face their probing questions, and didn't feel like going to a bar. So I brooded in my office. Elizabeth sent the draft divorce petition by email. I reviewed it, sent back a few nitpicky comments, and eventually went home. Zoe was making dinner when I walked in. She greeted me without mentioning the obvious tension, and I did the same. We had dinner together, chatting politely about the weather and the school year, empty conversation. After dinner, I cleaned up since she had done the cooking. She was watching TV when I finished. Instead of joining her, I headed to my office. Stephen, would you like to watch a movie with me? She began. No, Zoe, I interrupted. We have this huge elephant in the room. Until we resolve it, I can't feel comfortable sitting with you. Next week, we'll either resolve this, you give up your plan, or if you go through with it, I file for divorce. I retreated into my office. Later, I went to bed in the guest room. Sleep eluded me, unsurprisingly. The next day, Sunday, I punished myself with a long run, then went out to breakfast alone. I had no intention of bothering Scarlett or seeing my wife. Luckily, the Macon Bacon had a home game that afternoon. They lost, but for a few hours, I got lost in the flow of the game. Eventually, it ended, and I reluctantly headed home. I considered staying at a motel, but decided to give Zoe one last chance to save our marriage. There was no dinner together. I don't even know if she ate. I made a sandwich and buried myself in my office until I was tired enough to go to bed. As I headed to the spare bedroom, Zoe approached me. Stephen, I just want you to know that this will all be over tomorrow. We can talk when you get home from work, and you, not me, can decide whether I go back for more instruction on Wednesday. Zoe, I sighed, we're just going in circles. You're going to cheat tomorrow, and you can't see that. Your cheating will end our marriage, and you just can't see that either. Stephen, no, I promise, you'll see. Everything will be better tomorrow. Was she simply out of her mind due to a mental illness? Or was it a different kind of madness? Infatuation with someone else, perhaps? Or maybe she was experiencing a genuine midlife crisis. I had no idea. It felt like she was driving me to the edge. Instead of responding, I went straight to bed. Monday began with a call to Elizabeth, my divorce lawyer, to ensure the private investigator would follow Zoe if she went to her so-called instruction. I went to work but didn't expect to accomplish much. I sat at my desk, staring at the phone, anticipating a call from the PI. Just before noon, the phone did ring, but it was Elizabeth, not the PI. Stephen, the PI contacted me a few minutes ago. He followed your wife to a house on Laramie Drive. She entered about an hour ago and hasn't come out yet. Since the PI is also a court officer, he can serve the divorce papers at that location if you want. Elizabeth, thank you. I see no other option. Please instruct him to serve her. Can he record the service? I'd like to see her reaction if possible. I'm sure he has a video camera. I'll ask him to record and we'll email it to you later today. Thank you, Elizabeth. Let me know if I owe more for your fees or the PIs. Don't worry. Take care. Later that afternoon, I received the video in an email. Watching it on my laptop, I felt a profound sadness, no anger, and surprisingly, no tears. The camera seemed to be attached to the PI's breast pocket. The video began with him knocking on the door. A tall, handsome, fit-looking man in a disheveled bathrobe finally answered. "What?" The man at the door shouted at the private investigator. "I need to speak with Mrs. Zoe Walker," the PI replied calmly. "What? How be you? There's no one here by that name." "Listen carefully," the PI stated firmly. "I am a sworn officer of the Superior Court of Macon-Bibb County, and I know Mrs. Walker is present at this residence. Inform her that she must appear before me or face the consequences." Wow, I thought. I had to admire his audacity. His words were entirely truthful yet completely meaningless, but the man at the door clearly didn't realize that. Okay, hang on. I'll see if I can find her." He vanished from the camera's view and went back into the house. To my dismay, Zoe soon appeared at the door, looking equally disheveled in a bathrobe. "I'm Zoe Walker. Why are you looking for me?" she asked. "Ma'am, may I see some ID?" the PI requested. Wait a moment," she said, retreating into the house once more. She returned a few minutes later, holding her driver's license. "Here's my driver's license. Now tell me who you are and why you want me." The PI held her license up to the camera, then handed it back along with a folder of papers. "Zoe Walker, you have been served with a petition for divorce and related filings. You are advised to consult an attorney of your choosing." Zoe collapsed onto the floor. The video lingered just long enough to show her lying there before going blank. I guess I went blank too, because I didn't move until I eventually looked up to see Scarlett standing in front of my desk. "Stephen, she did it, didn't she?" "Oh, you poor dear. Do you want to?" "I don't know. I don't even know what to say. You can come to my house for dinner if you want. My mom made something, so it should be good. I know Hannah would be happy to see you." "Thank you, Scarlett, but I wouldn't be good company for anyone right now. But could I take a rain check?" "Of course you can. You're welcome anytime. Just call first," she added with a small grin, which earned a tiny smile from me in return. "Thank you, Scarlett. I really mean that. I'll see you tomorrow." Okay. She left, leaving me in a pit of self-pity, perhaps even feeling a shred of sympathy for Zoe. Despite her aspirations for a marriage education, a divorce petition was certainly not on her agenda. I spent the night at a nearby motel. Zoe called my cell multiple times, but I ignored them, eventually turning the phone off. It was a long, sleepless night. The morning run didn't help. That pretty much summed up my life for the following weeks. I would sneak back to the house when I knew Zoe wasn't there, grabbing whatever clothes and essentials I needed. I managed to find a decent apartment near work. Zoe and I never spoke or saw each other until the divorce hearing. At the court, Elizabeth and I sat at one table, while Zoe and her youngish lawyer, whom Elizabeth greeted with a nod, sat at the other. As I scanned the courtroom, I noticed the man from the video. I pointed him out to Elizabeth. She just shrugged and told me not to worry. Being in court felt alien to me since I wasn't a trial lawyer. When the bailiff called us to stand, we did. The judge, an older woman clad in black robes, entered, already scrutinizing some papers as she took her seat at the elevated bench. "Counsel, the matter is Walker versus Walker. Are you both ready to proceed?" Both attorneys answered affirmatively. "Ms. Hernandez, as counsel for the plaintiff, you're up first. Remember, no histrionics. There's no jury here, so drama is unhelpful and may lead to trouble." "Clear." Both lawyers confirmed, and the judge nodded at Elizabeth. "Your Honor, this is a straightforward action for divorce, due to Mrs. Walker's adultery. Mr. Walker, my client, seeks neither alimony nor offers any. There are no children, the marital home is rented, savings are to be split equally, and both parties will retain their respective retirement accounts, all as stated in the pleadings." Elizabeth then took her seat. "Thank you, counsel, admirably brief. Always appreciated. Mr. Graham, as counsel for the defendant, do you have a response? We do, Your Honor. My client denies the allegation of adultery, and we are prepared to present evidence proving no adultery occurred, neither in the manner and place alleged by the plaintiff nor at any other time. The judge asked, "What is your evidence?" I would like to call a witness, Your Honor, with your permission. Absolutely, this should be interesting. Your Honor, I call Patrick Green to the stand. As expected, the video technician stood up and approached the bench. He was sworn in and took his seat in the witness chair. Zoe's lawyer began to establish his credentials as a marriage education expert. Mr. Green, please inform the court about your relationship with Mrs. Zoe Walker. I was hired by Mrs. Walker for educational purposes to teach a short course in marriage techniques aimed at improving her and her husband's interactions. And are you certified to teach marriage education courses? Yes, I am certified by the California Board of Education and hold a diploma. Do you charge a fee for these courses? Yes, my standard fee is $1,000 for a 3-day course. However, Mrs. Walker informed me that her husband objected to the course, so I adjusted the curriculum to start with just 1 day of instruction in exchange for the $500 deposit she had paid. Did that single day of training include any intimate contact? No, sir, it did not. Mrs. Walker received a divorce petition before we had the opportunity to cover any material that involved intimate contact. She was so distraught over the divorce petition that we never continued with additional training. Thank you, Mr. Green. I have no further questions. The judge then turned to Elizabeth, Counselor, do you have any questions for this witness? Yes, Your Honor, a few. As Elizabeth stood up, she whispered to me, you may enjoy this. Turning to the witness, she began, Mr. Larson, may I call you that? Since that is your real name, correct? Oh, well, I go by Green. Larson was my birth name, but I no longer use it. Ma'am, did you stop using that name because it appears on your arrest record? Objection, Your Honor. Zoe's lawyer quickly interjected, but the judge raised a hand to pause him. Ms. Hernandez, I'm inclined to agree with Mr. Graham. Could you explain the relevance? Your Honor, this is relevant for 2 reasons. First, a criminal conviction affects the credibility of the witness's testimony. Second, Mr. Larson's criminal convictions are pertinent to the accusations of adultery. Proceed, but be aware that I am skeptical about the relevance, the judge warned. Thank you, Your Honor. Now, Mr. Larson, how many times and for what specific offenses have you been convicted, particularly in California? Mr. Larson hesitated, looking for assistance from Zoe's lawyer, but found none. Well, it was prostitution, he admitted in a near whisper. Mr. Larson, did I hear correctly that you were arrested for prostitution in California? Yes, but... And how many times have you been convicted, whether by guilty plea or guilty verdict, of charges related to prostitution, pandering, or similar offenses? Would you agree that the number is at least 24? Your Honor, opposing counsel is leading the witness. I object, Zoe's lawyer interjected. Mr. Graham, the judge responded firmly, since this is cross-examination, plaintiff's counsel is entitled to pose leading questions. Proceed, Ms. Hernandez. Thank you, Your Honor. So, Mr. Larson, isn't it true that you have at least 24 convictions? Well, some of those were just. Mr. Larson, just a simple yes or no, please. Okay, then yes. Thank you. Now, regarding your diploma from the Board of Marriage Education, how many hours of classroom instruction did you complete to obtain it? Well, no real classroom training. You see, I got my certification mostly through OGT. You mean on-the-job training? Yeah, that's how you learn, you know. I'm sure. Moving on to your introduction to Mrs. Walker, did you pre-approve her for your marriage education course? Yes, I did. It's standard procedure. And what methods did you use to pre-approve her? Well, to put it simply, she worked her mouth so I could gauge her experience level and how comfortable she felt. Thank you, Mr. Larson, for a most informative series of answers. Your Honor, although unusual, I hope you will allow me to summarize Mr. Larson's testimony. I think it would be helpful for my client as well as for the defendant. Proceed, Ms. Hernandez. Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Walker, Elizabeth said and turned to Zoe, and Mrs. Walker, Mr. Larson's testimony states that he is a convict with a meaningless degree that Mrs. Walker paid $500 to under the guise of education. Unfortunately for Mrs. Walker, despite the disguise, the crime in Georgia is still prostitution, for which Mr. Larson can be arrested and Mrs. Walker can be arrested as his client. And what Mrs. Walker did is considered to fit the definition of adultery in Georgia. Thus, I'm afraid Mrs. Walker is indeed guilty of adultery. Your Honor, I have no further questions for this witness. Ms. Hernandez, you've articulated your case well. Mr. Graham, do you have a response for the defendant? Your Honor, could we have a short recess to consider Ms. Hernandez's points? The judge granted the recess, and although the hearing dragged on for a while, it was clear that Elizabeth had won. She later told me that the information on Larson was easy to obtain. He had been driven out of California for scamming too many gullible women, especially married ones. Zoe was just one of many victims. Speaking of Zoe, as we were leaving the courtroom, I overheard her complaining to her lawyer, but I didn't even think about sleeping with that asshole. The divorce was granted under the terms Elizabeth had presented to the judge. Zoe wasn't arrested for her involvement with Larson, but he was charged with male prostitution. He was given a choice: leave Georgia immediately or spend 90 days in the county jail. Naturally, he chose to leave, likely hoping to find a new place for his schemes. I later heard that he made the mistake of passing through the small town where Zoe's family lived. I never found out if he actually made it out of that town. Scarlett and I dated and tried to get serious, but it just didn't work out. Honestly, I felt more connected to her mom and little girl than to Scarlett herself, and I think she sensed that. Despite this, we stayed friends and still are today. I'd eventually landed a sizable bonus and made partner at my firm. Shortly after, John Martinez, a shopping center developer from Nashville, made me an irresistible offer. He was so impressed with my work on his Macon project that he offered me a full-time position at his Nashville headquarters. The job came with equity interests in his new developments, presenting more risk than staying at the law firm, but promising far greater rewards. About a year after my divorce, I received a call from Zoe's mom. She obtained my number from my old law firm and called to inform me that Zoe had passed away. After the divorce, Zoe had moved back to South Georgia to live with her parents. She started experiencing severe headaches, and when she went to the doctor, they discovered a massive brain tumor. She died within a few weeks of the diagnosis. A few months after hearing this tragic news, I was in Tallahassee, Florida, scouting a potential shopping center site. I decided to drive up to Zoe's hometown to pay my respects at her grave. Her gravestone appeared newly installed, bearing the dates of her birth and death along with the inscription: Zoe Walker, beloved daughter and loving wife. Standing there, I was overwhelmed with memories of our time together, so many wonderful moments cut short by a tragic end. I couldn't help but wonder if her erratic behavior could have been caused by the brain tumor. It's possible, after all. Brain tumors are real and MBRs aren't, as far as I know. Accepting the gravestone's inscription gave me some comfort. For most of our time together, it was true. Remembering Zoe as a loving wife helped me feel better about myself and my future. And that, truly, is the end of my story, in memory of my loving wife. Thank you for watching this video to the end. If you liked it, please like it and subscribe to the channel. See you soon.